Donchi, welcome back to the Sickle and Sash podcast. I'm Josh McKenna, and I live on the ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations in so-called Vancouver, BC. I'm Métis. My family's roots run deep in Treaty 1 territory of the Red River Valley in Manitoba. My family names include Carrier, Hamlin, Vandal, Parenteau, Landry, Laurence, McGillivray, and the unnamed Cree and Saulteaux women that populate my family tree. Today, our guest is Christi Belcourt. She's an artist and activist, and she has a series of accomplishments, but I will let her introduce herself for the most part. Christi, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Christi Belcourt Ntsikason. I'm Antusakaik and Donjaba. I'm going to switch languages because I really don't. I guess I would say Ochinia, maybe, or I can't remember. See, I'm learning my language, and it's really hard to even get out my introduction. I'm learning also, I live on the territory, Anishinaabeg territory here in Ontario, where I've lived almost my whole life. And so I'm learning Anishinaabe, so sometimes it's easier for me to do the introduction in that language, but I'm trying really hard to learn Cree, which is the language my grandparents spoke. That was their first language. And the language of everyone in Lac Saint Anne at least 2 generations ago.
Oh, that's super cool. I mean, I would love to learn Cree as well. I mean, it's a bit of a toss-up for me, but I've heard a lot of elders say that it's better to learn Cree before Michif if you kind of are picking between the two. Some of my siblings and cousins were learning Michif for a second, but they were taking a course out here with a guy from the island, and they were kind of getting into it and like learn to actually introduce themselves in the language, which is super cool. So maybe season 3 of the podcast.
I think it's great to learn the language anywhere you can because it's important, but it's really important to know which dialect, which language your community, your people spoke, or I should say languages. But whatever community you identify with. So, for example, in the Treaty 1 territory where your family is from, or Red River Métis territory, I would say, that tends to lean towards a little bit towards Michif, and there's specific sounds and specific ways of phrasing things that tell people where you're from. And the Cree that my grandparents spoke had a few little French words in it, but it's not Michif. And that's kind of a new word that's being used in that area. One of the only language speakers that we have left from Lac Saint Anne, I asked her about like the use of that word. Should we use Michif instead of Cree, or what's the language that you speak? I asked her, and she said Nehiawe. And I said, okay, well, what's what do you call it in English? And she says Cree. And I said, okay. What about Michif? Do you ever use that word? She said, that's a new word that's come in this area. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? And she said, that's okay, whatever people want to call it. Like she was all right with it. And then she said, but I'm going to call it Cree because that's what I grew up with.
Yeah, it is actually interesting, all of the different names for the Métis, or like just to segue into that a little bit, because we are known by so many different names all over the place, really. And it seems like the term Métis is the most popular, but it's one of the newer terms. I think when I was talking with your dad a few episodes ago, he was saying...
Otipemsawak is the people who own themselves. And that's speaking, it's kind of a strange thing to say we are Otipemsawak, because Otipemsawak is actually third person plural, which means they, them. So if we're going to say we are, it would be a different iteration of that word. But the root of that word is depemso, or something like that. the debe in there indicates um, someone or something or people who own themselves is kind of a weird thing, but it speaks about freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It does speak about ownership in there too. Like it's a little bit of a weird word, but not in the sort of English way of thinking of ownership, I guess. It's more like we govern ourselves. Um, and then there's another word, and I never say this right because I'm still learning, but um apatigo-san, something like that. It means like
Mm-hmm.
half cousin, half sibling kind of thing. So it means like we are relatives. Um, but it recognizes the I guess the what used to be called the half-breed nature of things. So it
Mm-hmm.
depends on if you're taught who you're talking to. Some people won't identify themselves as either of those things. They will identify themselves as the lakes or the rivers that they come from. So they'll say, I am, I'm talking about people who can speak the language and identify themselves through their language. I've heard people say, I'm from Big River, or I'm from this lake, or this river, or this place on the land. So people identify themselves with very specific community, very specific place. And I think this is why when we're talking about Métis um, identity, where for me, that is maybe the most important thing. It's okay to know, like it's good to know who your grandmas are, your great grandmas, your great grandpas, all those things. But you have to have kind of a living connection, first of all, to family. So in order to identify as Métis to me, your Métisness can't come from uh, an ancestor that's a really long time ago.
Yeah.
Your Métisness has to come from your grandparents and your parent or parents. So your parent has to be Métis. Your grandparents have to be Métis. Your great grandparents have to, well, they don't have to all be Métis, but they have to be Métis. They have to be from a specific place or places because people moved, people intermarried, they still do, right? You move around, you intermarry, you go into different communities. They have to have a history of a community that they can connect to. They have to have languages and they have to know which language it is. So there's a word that was bandied about back in the sort of 2000s, I think, was pan-Indigenous, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, this idea that there's like one Indigenous people or one Indigenous nation, and everybody needs to just sort of blend and share in this one Indigenous culture, which of course everyone knows is not true,
Yeah.
right? We have many, many different nations, different languages, different cultures. We share common values, common teachings, common laws about about the laws that come from the earth. And we respect and observe those laws. And those are passed down through generations of our ancestors to us. So we have those things, but we also have specific place. And I think in this era that we're living in now, people who are Métis, even if they didn't grow up in a community like myself, I didn't grow up in Lac Saint Anne. I'm taking the time to know where my ancestry comes from. I'm taking the time to understand which dialect of language do they speak. It has to be specific. I'm getting older now, so all my grandmas are gone, which is really sad. But you have to take the time to find these things out. It's no longer acceptable to me anyway, to just go get a card based on the fact that one of your great grandparents got Métis script. I'm not saying you don't have Métis blood. I'm just saying that's not good enough. Belonging to an organization is not an identity. You have to know where you come from.
It's it's quite telling actually when that is the first thing that someone who's like recently found out that they have some sort of Métis ancestry does, where they find out and then it's immediately get the card. It's like it's just a weird first step. It's like maybe like if it's a matter of reconnecting and it's something beyond just having one random ancestor back in the day, right? Why not like get into community first and get to know people like where you're from and find out about that? Like why is it a jump to join the organization? Um, it's it's strange, isn't it? Like, and I think there is a little bit of a tension with that. It is this kind of reminds me of a discussion I had with Daniel Voth last season, but there's obviously a generation where a lot of people hid being Métis, after the fallout of the resistances and everything like that. So I think that's different if there's a generation where that connection was skipped and then it was picked up again afterwards, rather than finding out you have one ancestor when you do like a 23andMe test or something like that. Like my grandpa, right? When he was raised, and he grew up in St. Boniface in Manitoba, and for the majority of his childhood, his parents told him that they were Métis sympathizers, like they sympathized with the cause of the Métis, but that they weren't Métis. Now, of course, the truth came out a little while later. And then I was raised knowing it my whole life by my mom, and my grandpa's still around, but he lost that connection because of that, and of course it comes out of a place of fear. Like my great grandmother went to residential school and she saw how the Métis were treated, and it's sad, but that's different in my opinion than finding some random ancestor and then suddenly claiming this identity and connection to community and land that you know nothing about.
Totally is. And um, I think like people who, so for example, for me, right? I grew up in cities. I had to go, it's been a lifelong journey for me to reconnect with land, to understand language, even just a little bit that I understand. It's a struggle to do that, but it's doable. And we can gain these things back. We can bring these things back within our community. I think there are people who never lost those under those teachings about land and about spirituality and about there's people who never lost that at all. And it's not like we're all just one big group. I was going to say on the topic of like pan-indigenization of things. I think what I'm witnessing now within Métis Nation is uh, there's two things sort of going on simultaneously in my mind. One is people are wanting to ensure that the people who are members of their organizations are Métis, right? And so they're
Yeah.
going through due diligence to do the research, to get the documentation and all of that, which is great and needed. And I mean, I reject the idea that people say that that was never happening and you could just get a card for $50. Sure, there was little organizations here and there
Mm.
that did that, but they did not these were not the national or provincial organizations. The provincial organizations and the national organizations have tried uh, really hard to make sure that the paperwork and that they weren't handing out, cards for $50.
Mm.
I think that that's important to note the difference. But at the same time, here's where I think where we need to discuss as a Métis Nation is I believe we should now explore the term pan-Métisism because what's
Mm.
happening is like the MNC looks like they're going to be toast pretty soon. I
Oh,
don't know how they'll revive that, right?
yeah,
So now we're
it's
looking
done, I
at,
think.
I think so. So now we're
Yeah.
looking at the MMF as being the national representative body, which is what they set themselves up to do, right? to be the national body, the authority of who is and who isn't Métis. That's problematic to begin with, but I'm not going to get into that. But what I will say is I think while they're doing good work by identifying specifically who is their membership, the mistake that's being made is this pan-Métisism, where if you can prove that one of your two of your three of your ancestors had connections to Red River, then you can get a membership with the MMF, right?
Mm.
So what happens is in that, like I would be eligible to get a membership within the MMF because I have at least two great great grandparents who accepted Métis script in Red River.
Yep.
I have other grandparents, other ancestors, a whole bunch of others who got Northwest script in Lac Saint Anne and around in Alberta, what is now Alberta region. So my connection is to a specific lake, Lac Saint Anne. My connection is to my grandma and my grandpa, my dad, who was born in Lac Saint Anne. My connection is to the dialect of Cree that they speak. My connection is to all of my ancestors who formed a cultural, a culture and a community in and around the region. Now, what the MMF is asking me to do is to bypass all that, give up my Lac Saint Anne uh, kind of uniqueness, and get a card with the MMF that then blankets me with this statement that says, I am Red River Métis. And I'm not willing to do that because it erases, to me, it erases all of the beauty and uniqueness of our communities. The organizations began as nonprofit uh, corporations modeled after unions. So Maria Campbell speaks about this quite a bit, where she said when they were organizing back in the late 60s and 70s, unions were also organizing. And so the union models of getting locals, delegates, membership, and using the Roberts Rules of Order, all those things, and the way to register yourself as a nonprofit corporation within the federal government of Canada, um, the way to set up bank accounts, the way to set up your board of governors, the way to set up your regional reps, all that stuff comes from union organizing. And we have not been able as a nation to step back from that and ask the hard questions about what works and what doesn't work when it comes to trying to push Indigenous people into a unionized form of corporate structure. And then what's happening now is those corporate structures and the leaders in those corporate structures have gone on to call themselves governments. And this kind of marrying between this this governance structure that came out of a unionized model in with making the assumption that now we're all okay with that. We've never had a chance to step back to sort of go, let's dismantle some of the things that are sort of anti-Indigenous in its foundation,
Yep.
you know. And so this is sort of where I'm alone in this in a lot of ways, like in my thinking, because if I try and bring this up, it's taken as a criticism first of our people, which it's not, and it's taken as a criticism of the leaders who work so hard to struggle at the beginning of formation of these places. It's not, and it's taken as a criticism of current day people who feel the proud of who they are, and they should feel proud of who they are. But I like to sort of think like I wish we had a chance to kind of think about these things a little bit deeper and really sort of be prepared to sort of say things are not working and it's nobody's fault. Let's just try and fix them. Like the Roberts Rules of Order is one of my most, I hate that so much.
Yeah. Well, I think now is a really important time to be having this conversation, right? Because as we're kind of seeing the Métis National Council crumble and a lot of infighting between the different provincial reps, um, I mean, now's the time where if any change is going to happen, it's going to happen during this period of turmoil, right? Um, so yeah, I think like now's the time to put that out there, and maybe we could kind of call back to some of, and you can provide some nuance because I'm hearing you say that it's like you don't want to sound like you're criticizing these leaders and these people who identify with these representatives and stuff. But can we pivot into uh, in when you requested to have your name removed from the registry of the Métis Nation of Ontario? Can you tell me a bit more about what was going on behind that decision?
Time. The NWMO, that's the corporation. I think I don't know if it's a crown corporation. I believe it is, or it's closely like a crown corporation that is responsible for researching and exploring and finding a location to build a deep geological repository for the most toxic of nuclear waste. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that when you have a meltdown, you get Chernobyl, where nobody can live. That's the stuff that stays um, radioactive for over 100,000 years. So, nuclear power, everybody touts nuclear power as being something that's green, that doesn't hurt the environment. But I always like to remind people that nuclear power comes from uranium mining, which is certainly not green.
Yep.
And Indigenous people who have lived around, who still have to live around the places where uranium has been mined or dumped, the tailings have been dumped, have um, their communities have been devastated health-wise, and their lands have been devastated. And I live in a region in Anishinaabe territory which is close by Elliott Lake. Elliott Lake is the site of your I think 12 uranium mines were going on at one time. Elliott Lake is a new town that was just built in 1940 when uranium was discovered. It
Mm-hmm.
Before that there wasn't even a road going into that place. And when they discovered uranium, they began to build roads and violently remove and kick off indigenous people who were living there at the lake and in the region. Those people are Anishinaabeg people who live in what is now Serpent River First Nation. So Serpent River was always, as far as I understand, from what I've been told, was always part of their territory, right from the Great Lake, so the north shore of Lake Huron, all the way up to further north than Elliott Lake. This is all their territory, right? Specifically for that community and their community use of land use. And I forget what the year was, but um, 1990 something or something around there, maybe earlier, maybe 70 something. Now I can't remember. But one of the dams broke on the tailings pond, and it polluted all 90 kilometers from Elliott Lake all the way down through Serpent River First Nation community into the Great Lakes. It killed all the fish. People couldn't trap, they couldn't hunt. Um, uh, Animals were getting cancer. People were getting sick. They had to take loaders to clean out the fish out of the river. And this is the people's life is the Serpent River, is the lakes. And um, and so this happened, and Elliott Lake remains the biggest contributor of radioactive waste to the Great Lakes to this day because it still leaches out. So Serpent River said no to having a deep geological a repository built in their territory, and they were an adamant no. At the same time, the NWMO was giving all these consultation dollars out to all of these organizations and trying to get the buy-in from people to build this thing in Ontario. And because Serpent River said no, and because other people in Anishinaabeg territory had said no, the MNO, I felt, should not have taken this consultation money. They should have stood in solidarity and just said, you know what, this is not our territory, and we should just say no alongside and back up Serpent River First Nation. So that really bothered me that they took this money. What they said was just for consultation. But you have to understand the NWMO was paying communities for their sporting events for kids and sponsoring this and sponsoring that. And that's how they get in,
Yeah.
And so that bothered me. The other thing is they also were involved in some kind of deal to approve a mining thing, a gold mine somewhere, and they were also um, taking money for consultation for Line 3 pipeline to be built and supporting that. And I tried to call people, I tried to email the leadership at the MNO at the time. I tried to get some conversations. I made an email, a long email pleading with people to like meet with me and don't do this kind of thing. And I didn't even get a response back. And I thought, like, if you're not even willing to talk about it, then there's a real problem. And
Yeah.
I needed to leave the organization because of that. Now, if I knew what I knew today, um, I would have left the organization for that reason, and also because my people are not from Ontario, and I don't identify as an Ontario Métis. My
Hmm.
people are from a specific place. And right now, the organizations, MMF is the only organization that allows you to apply for a membership outside the provincial borders. But the Métis Nation of Alberta doesn't. And I can't
Hmm.
get my membership over there. And the Lac St. Dan community doesn't either. So I can't get my membership over there. So I right now don't have a Métis membership, and that's fine with me. Like I don't care, but it'd be nice to have my membership somewhere where I actually am from.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's part of the problem with the provincial reps right now is that they do seem to be functioning primarily as like almost like social groups. Like they're not so much tied to their land base anymore, especially in BC, right? Like the whole premise of having a Métis Nation British Columbia is that there is like one tiny sliver of northern BC that has a historic Métis community in it, and that's it. And the vast majority of people who have memberships with MNBC, including myself, are not from that community. Like, so that's the whole premise of having this whole organization. And when they might have, I would say, less than 100 people who are actually a part of MNBC who come from that community. So it's really just a social organizing group at this point, right? Like it doesn't really have that connection to place or anything, which is part of the problem of all this as well. Like it also it makes sense to me because we have to deal with the colonial governments in which we live within the territory they're occupying. But it also does always read as strange to me when we're always identifying ourselves with like colonial borders in provinces and things like that. Like I'm MNBC or I'm Métis Nation Alberta or I'm Métis Nation Ontario. Like it feels like we should be having these smaller groupings that are actually tied to place, but we're losing that quite a bit.
I'd
Um,
like to see us be like more like a confederacy or something
mm,
like along those lines, something where communities are represented, and then communities come together to decide what is best for their region, and then what is best for their nation overall, for the nation, our nation overall. And if we, you know, I just I'm having a hard time, yeah, understanding how these provincial I think these provincial borders, like structuring our organizations via provinces has been, maybe it was for expediency, and it served its purpose, but I like Louis Riel's government has always been like, well, they considered themselves a provisional government.
Mm.
And I believe that the MNO was set up as a provisional government, which is um, that things can shift and change and should shift and change over time. And we are a living nation, and we have living languages, living cultures. And so and things will naturally shift and change. And if we don't, then it'll break as a something that isn't bendable when the winds shift.
So what I'm hearing is like there's almost like a little bit of, because of the disruption of colonization, that there was this kind of necessary pan-indigenous solidarity almost that murkied the waters a little bit, and it was kind of a necessary imperfect solution that has brought us to a point where we are able to really dive back deep into our specific communities. On the topic of that, of the that kind of like reconnecting with specific culture, it kind of reminded me. This is just a random anecdote, but my brother um, had a Métis elder offer to make him a custom pair of moccasins, and we'd just recently found in storage a piece of flower embroidery that our great grandmother had made. So the elder actually replicated the flower embroidery pattern from our great grandmother on the moccasins for him, and it's fantastic, super cool.
That is so beautiful.
Hmm.
See, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be making I have boxes and boxes now from 4 decades of painting, of doing like of all my own patterns that I've made through my observations of nature, through whatever. But, I'm very influenced by beadwork, by things that I see, whatever. And I think, like, if we can, um, we should be able to, if we can like pull out just even like one little flower pattern that
Hmm.
our grandmas might have, embroidered, and put it in there, and, speak about that, because I'm thinking a lot about that these days, about the importance of what I always say grandmothers, but I do mean grandfathers as well, what our ancestors, what our families did to survive, and how they still made things beautiful, even in the hardest of times.
Yeah.
And so I think that does sum up a lot of my own art practice. Um, I I'm very aware of what's going on in the earth. I try and keep up on things, although it's a lot to keep up on with everything going on globally. But I do try and keep up on it. I try to bear witness to the genocide that's happening in Palestine. I bear witness to what's happening in Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I try and bear witness and speak out where I can about anything that I feel is an injustice in the world. And then at the same time, I'm also acutely aware um, that of what's going on with like the climate, and I feel like everyone else really overwhelmed and depressed and like powerless against these against the corporatocracy, the massive power that these corporations wield. And there's so much money to be made in death and destruction. And and so I'm a firm anti-capitalist.
Mm.
And I think we have to start to look at things like people who have done thinking and writing around degrowth, and what is the alternative? What does an egalitarian society look like that is not an oppressive socialist society or an oppressive, fascist society? What does egalitarianism look like if it's not communism? And I think within Indigenous communities and nations, we've practiced that from time immemorial. So we have we have the values, we have the it has been done before, you know. And then in terms of my art practice, I keep painting flowers. I keep going back to these talking about the beauty of the earth, of the power of the earth, of the strength of the animals, that they are our relatives. Trees are our relatives, plants are our relatives, they are medicines. Um, they communicate with us even if we don't feel that we hear them. We are one living organism, essentially, on this ball of rock and water floating through space around a sun that is a ball of fire. We are in a great grand mystery that none of us can explain and certainly cannot write down in a religious text. And I feel like we're seeing the world sort of split in half between people who can't see that, what I just said, and people who can. And I don't know where it's going. I don't like where it's going, but a lot of elders have foretold the times that are going to get pretty hard for people. So now we have to ask ourselves what our values are and what are we willing to to fight for. And I don't think it's enough. Like social media gives you the illusion that you're doing something when nothing's actually done. So I don't think it's enough to just like be on social media. I think you have to actually physically meet face to face with people and have some plans for how you're going to take care of your people, your community, not just your people, as in, I wouldn't want Métis people to only take care of Métis people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the people around you, in your circle, in your community, in your town, in your neighborhood, in your city. How are people going to be taken care of while getting beaten up by the police? That's we're moving into a society that will be massively surveilled. They want to, it looks like they want to push crypto or push some kind of system like what China's starting to experiment with, which is a social credit system.
Mm.
And I think we need to have our eyes aware of not just what is happening within our nation and all of this infighting within Métis Nation. It it's not serving us anything to prepare for future generations to be able to survive if all we're looking at is the past. So while we're informed by the past and while we seek to correct the wrongs of the past, we can't turn our eyes away from what is actually coming down the road. And I know that sounds like conspiracy theorist crazy talk, but it's the technology that's different this time. It's not like before where you could, where revolutions happened by the people for the people and they could fight these uh, governments or whoever rulers and take them out because the people were just, you know, too numerous. It's the technology and surveillance that's got me nervous about what's to come and the militarization of police, but the weaponry that's being developed, like these quad quadcopter things, these um,
Mm.
dog dog robots that have are being outfitted with guns, um, these drone copters that are have you know uh, not machine guns but AR whatever 15s on them, and they can fly up to your third floor apartment building and take you out if you want.
Mm.
It's this that's got me nervous more than anything, I think.
Yeah. That doesn't sound conspiratorial to me at all. I mean, it is true. Like the surveillance is through the roof right now and is only seemingly getting worse. It's just a matter of really bringing about like a global kind of panopticon of self-policing. And when you're not self-policing, there is this, of course, like you're saying, the introduction of technology into a more militarized police force, which of course makes acts of violence so much easier because it's even, it's like you take the gun was one step into kind of disassociating from enacting violence upon someone else, but a drone that is fully self-operated where you can click a button and then not have to think about the damage that it's doing is a whole other thing that removes the humanity out of everything. And I agree with you with what you were saying about like social media not being enough. Like we clearly need to actually get organized and get out there and make things happen. But speaking of social media, I did want to bring it to something that I have seen you be very vocal about on social media. Maybe we can talk more about how we can actually organize around this. And you brought it up a few minutes ago, but I did want to talk to you about what's going on in Palestine right now and how that relates to Indigenous struggle at large. I've noticed on